Good morning. Welcome back to our Impact Summit from the break. And we are now going to continue with two showcases. These are going to follow each other separately. First one will be presented by Partners Group and Partners Group Impact Investments. The topic is about values-based impact investing. Is going to be presented by Urs Baumann and Carmela Mondino. We will then have a short Q&A session, and afterwards we are going to move to the next showcase presented by Denny Kennedy about Energy Nexus, and is actually a non-profit organization. So it will be very nice to hear how a non-profit organization as accelerator can work together to create an impact. And we will have a Q&A session after his presentation. So now we start first with the presentation of Partners Group by Urs Baumann and Carmela Mondino. I'm going to present Urs Baumann in a few sentences. He's a co-founder, CEO, and chairman of the investment committee at Partners Group Impact Investment. He's passionate about building and investing in businesses that offer market rate returns while helping to address pressing social and environmental changes. And Carmela Mondino, she is responsible for the ESG and sustainability in Partners Group. And she's a professional with vast experience in multidisciplinary and culturally challenging projects. So welcome to our session, Urs and Carmela. And I'm going to now leave you to present your value-based impact investing. Thank you.
Thank you, Desa, and welcome everybody to our showcase. So what we like to do today is to, in this session, to show you Partners Group holistic approach, as I would say, to responsible and impact investing. And what we want to say as a message is that there are different needs out there, and there are different ways how we as Partners Group, as a group, respond to these needs, and want to give you some insights into these. I'm joined, as I said, by my colleague Carmela, who leads the ESG practice of Partners Group. As I said, I'm one of the co-founder and CEO of PG Impact Investments, which is an independent firm from Partners Group, but is supported by Partners Group. So let's start maybe with an overview of the spectrum of capital. And as you can see, and you probably all know this, it starts on the left with negative screening and the management of ESG risks. And then you come to the next level of ESG integration, where the investor actively manages and improves ESG opportunities across its portfolio. Then we see the next stage, what we call impact investing. For us, impact investing starts where the investor has a clear intention to create and to measure impact, and where the purpose of the investment is to address a specific social or environmental need. And then on the very far right, you see the angle of philanthropic investments at the far right of the spectrum. And these investments are, in our mind, often necessary to kickstart a new idea and to help a business to prove its business model. As you can see on the bottom there, Partners Group and PG Impact Investments is actively engaging in all of these, in the entire spectrum of responsible and impact investing. All of Partners Group's investments follow a very rigorous ESG approach that we will allude to later. And then we have specific initiatives for impact investing, both at the side of Partners Group, at the side of PG Impact Investments, and at our employee foundation, which is called PG Impact Verein. Moving to the next slide. We want to also say that responsible and impact investing is not just the new flavor of the day at Partners Group. Partners Group has started its impact investing activities with the creation of PG Impact Verein, the employee foundation, back in 2006. After the tsunami hit Asia in 2004, employees at Partners Group wanted to help in the best way they know, which is through investments. In 2008, Partners Group was one of the first private market investors to sign the Principles for Responsible Investments. And these experiences then led to the creation of PG Impact Investments, a firm that specializes in impact investing in 2015, and the launch of the Impact Fund at Partners Group in 2018. So we want to show you a bit about these different initiatives today. But before we jump to this, I would like to ask Carmela to give you an overview of the standard ESG practices at Partners Group, which underpin all of our investment activities.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Urs, for the introduction. As Urs mentioned, I'm responsible for integrating environmental, social, and governance topics in all of Partners Group investments. So we are private market investors. So this includes private equity, infrastructure, real estate, and debt. And although we have different shades or different adaptations of our process according to the asset class, this diagram that you see here showing how we integrated in sourcing, due diligence, ownership, and then how we report on it is applicable to all of them. So during sourcing, we look already at what the product or service of the companies is and what it is, what is the impact of these products or services on society or the environment. So similar to the spectrum of responsible capital, we exclude certain investments based on what they do, but we actually encourage also our deal teams to invest into things like renewable energy, education, or healthcare. Where we spend a lot of time then is doing due diligence, where we look at the practices of our companies and how environmental, social, or governance could be risks or value creation opportunities for our assets. And we use the findings of this due diligence to make sure that during ownership, we integrate ESG into the strategies of our companies. And of course, we report on it to our clients. So if I move to the next slide, I mean, we're pretty systematic at Partners Group. We have a dashboard with KPIs for each one of our companies and also general dashboard. But how we get through, from the status of the companies when we buy them to actually making a tangible improvement is through projects. And these projects really vary according to the kind of industry. So, in a restaurant chain like Fermat, what you see on the right, we would work on food waste and how to reduce it. But then on a company that is focusing on early childhood education, we would look into how we can improve the health and safety of our students. So as you can already sense, these are things that we would do for any kind of company, independent of whether it is an impact investment or not. But the idea behind it is that it's our commitment to make better businesses, and ESG is a way of doing that. So that's why we do that for any investment that we make. Now that we covered the right side of the spectrum, I will leave it to Urs to walk you through or to introduce you to how we look at impact.
Thank you, Carmela. So this wheel here is kind of summarizing how we think about impact at Partners Group. And also this here we want to demonstrate that we recognize that impact is not the same for everyone. Each investor has different impact preferences or investment needs, and these are shown here on the right of the slide. So as an investor, each of you need to ask yourself, now, what impact do I want to achieve? Is it social impact? Is it an environmental impact? Or do I want to focus on a very specific topic? You need to ask yourself who should benefit from this investment. Should it be people living at the base of the pyramid? Should it be people that are underserved, or should it be society in general or at large? You should ask yourself, where do I want to create impact? Is it more in emerging market or in developed markets? Or do I really want to create impact where I live in my hometown, home country? Then next question is, what is the depth or the scale that I'm looking for? You also can ask yourself, do I only want to invest if there is a true market cap and my capital really creates additionality, so to speak, into the market? And last but not least, most investors are constrained by the size of the investments that they want to do or need to do and the return requirements that they have. So you see that if you combine these different needs, you come up with a whole variety of needs that clients has, and correspondingly, we as an industry and as asset managers need to come up with solutions which are tailored to these specific needs. And one fund can't do it all. As you see, the needs are so different. So that's why you rightfully see that now the whole industry is producing a lot of different strategies to cater for these different needs. So what are we doing at Partners Group? So as mentioned before, we have three very distinctive approaches to impact, catering to the different needs of the market and our clients. Within Partners Group, we offer impact investment solutions for institutional clients who require scale. So they can't just invest 5 million, they need to have a big enough product that they can invest in. And they often require a proven and a long-term track record for their fiduciary duty. These clients typically require a focus on more developed markets and generally are happy with an impact for society at large. As they have so many other constraints, they take kind of the impact which they can achieve with their constraints. Now with PG Impact Investments, we focus on impact investment solutions that improve the lives of people that live at the base of the pyramid or are underserved. By nature, this means that we invest mostly in emerging and frontier markets, and we go there where, let's say, traditional private equity would not go to. We call this deep impact strategies, or the strategy to improve lives of people that live at the base of the pyramid. Compared to the impact at scale solutions of Partners Group, deep impact solutions are not easily scalable, and today they do not offer a long-term track record. So such solutions are mostly suitable for private investors, family offices, and foundations. And then last but not least, our employee foundation, PG Impact Verein, offers catalytic capital to social innovations, to startups and early stage social enterprises who are not yet ready to receive institutional investors like Partners Group or PG Impact Investments.
So, I mean, one question that comes up a lot when we think about our different strategies, and in particular, I would say the one that we call impact at scale and the one that we call deep impact is how do these generate returns and how do these compare to our normal or traditional private equity investments. Before we went into this journey, we did the exercise of flagging all the investments that we had made in the past that could be considered impact investments, and analyzed what was their return, and came up to the conclusion that their returns are in line with what you would expect from any investment that Partners Group normally makes. So this is why we dared to create our impact at scale strategy, because we proved that we can have a positive impact while also generating market rate returns.
Good. So this again summarizes our three approaches. You have starting with impact at scale, where we seek to generate positive impact for the society at large. These investments are large-scale investments, typical several hundred millions of invested capital, mostly focused on developed markets. And we have a proven track record here in these investments. Deep impact, that's what my company is doing. Again, the focus is on improving the lives of people which are underserved or live at the edge of poverty. A strong focus on emerging markets. We are targeting market rate returns, but we cannot backtrack our investments for 25 years as Partners Group. We started investing in 5 years, so a limited investment track record for that strategy. And again, the catalytic side, where we try to build a ecosystem and help initiatives or social entrepreneurs to really prove the case, with the hope that at one time we at PG Impact and or Partners Group can invest them at a later stage. Now, we want to give you some specific examples of these three approaches, and we start here with healthcare. And over to you, Carmela, for the introduction of Confluent Health.
Thanks, Urs. Yes, as we discussed, we all have impact at scale as part of our strategy, and a recent investment that we have made in that space is Confluent Health. Confluent Health is a provider of physical therapy services. They have over 100,000 patients every year, and the reason why we demonstrated using our methodology a link to the Sustainable Development Goals and a positive impact at the end is that when you think about physical therapy, if it's done early enough, it can prevent surgery, which is expensive and more dangerous for the patients, and also it can reduce the use of medications such as opioids. And at the moment in the US, that's a huge issue around younger people becoming addict to certain substances, and eventually even reducing the overall life expectation in the country. So through Confluent Health, we managed to have, as I mentioned before, positive impacts and at the same time returns that are in line with our direct private equity strategies. Now, on deep impact, Urs, you want to discuss a bit on Nile?
Yeah, Project Nile is the leading gastroenterology hospital in India. We have done this investment last year, and if you look at the size of the investment, here you see a big difference. It's 12 million. That's our typical investment size versus 250 million at the Partners Group side. The hospital runs at a phenomenal efficiency of 300 procedures per day. So every second minute, there's one procedure being done. And this efficiency allows for a very affordable pricing for their services. On average, prices are about 30% below what other hospitals are charging. And what's also for us as impact investors important, 30% of its bed capacity are committed to the lowest income patients, which also receive some subsidies from the more higher price paying patients. In addition, the hospital runs a mobile outreach program to rural areas in India that so far has reached more than 10 million Indians in that program. For us, this was an equity investment to finance the expansion of a second hospital in India. And as you can see, we expect normal private equity returns for that investments.
Mhm. Yeah, and finally, to wrap up with healthcare, we have NEO for Namibia. This is what we call belongs to our catalytic impact or the kind of investment that we make or grant that we provide through our foundation. And it's an organization of Swiss doctors, actually, that aims at reducing the mortality rates of newborns in Namibia. And we help them, provide to get equipment to expand their services to new regions in Namibia. Um, Now that we have covered healthcare, now moving a bit to the energy side. Also here we have the three kinds of impact. On the impact at scale side, we have, for instance, a project like Grassroots. It's an platform in Australia that includes solar, wind, but also batteries. The idea is to create the largest platform in Australia for renewable energy. And basically these 2 million megawatts hour that you see here will represent 1.6 or at least 1.6% of the energy needed by Australia to be able to phase out other sources of energy like coal. So in this case, we have seeing an environmental impact. It's an amount, as you see here, initially 700 million, but it really depends on the size of the platform, and it could continue increasing if we continue growing it. But this is also another example of the kind of platform that we would make on when we look at the impact at scale.
Yes, and on the deep impact side, the question is how do we provide reliable and affordable energy to people that live off-grid? Here, the example that we want to showcase is Greenland Planet with their product Sun King that provides solar household system to the world's 1.3 billion people that living off-grid. You see the company has reached more than 9 million of these. Many of these households today use kerosene lamps as their primary source of light and running the risk of house fires and bad air quality related health issues. We have provided a senior secured loan to refinance Greenland Planet's lease to own or pay as you go business model, which means that these devices are installed with a small upfront payment, and then they are being paid as they are used. So that creates a refinancing opportunity for us. And this loan has been fully repaid last year with an attractive return of 11, an IRR of 11%. And then from our employee foundation, that's probably one of our first impact investments, one of our earlier impact investments in that field is Sunny Money. Sunny Money is an NGO that distributes solar lamps to people that live off-grid. And here the employee foundation provided working capital, again, to refinance the NGO's needs to allow to scale up their distribution program of these solar lamps. So this concludes kind of the overview of our approach, and we are open and happy to receive questions if there's time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have one question from the audience that I'm going to read. Does PG Impact Investments rely solely on the UN SDGs for impact measurement, or does it also use other tools for measuring impact, like IRIS Plus?
We have quite a comprehensive approach. So we start. So when we assess the impact, we use the impact management framework that we have further developed for our needs, and the same we do at Partners Group Impact at Scale. If it comes how to measure and report impact, we first start with a theory of change to understand how the output and to the products and services of a company, what are the short-term outcomes and the long-term impact that such a company can generate. And based on that analysis, then we set targets and metrics for with the management. And usually, yes, if whenever possible, they're then based on IRIS or IRIS Plus if they're useful. Otherwise, we define them ourselves. But mostly, yes, the measurements, we try to link them back to IRIS or IRIS Plus.
Okay, thank you. Another question is companies like you are essential for private sector side. What is the ratio of the total amount of assets under partners group and the assets under assets in PG impact
Well,
investment?
for PG impact investments, 100%. So the whole purpose of us is to nothing else than impact investments, deep impact investments. Now, for Partners Group, I let Carmela answer that question.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So for our direct investments, and these are the assets that we have mapped, we estimate between 20 and 25% of all our investments to be in line with our impact at scale strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the average size of the impact businesses you're investing in? At what stage they are when you invest them?
That is very, very different between Partners Group and us. Again, our average ticket size is between we wish we could go below 4 and 5, but it just becomes uneconomically. We like to do tickets between 5 and 20 million. There we see a big gap where traditional private equity plays is just not interesting for them to do. So that is our focus, and then the companies are accordingly. We are not venture capitalists, so we don't do early stage ventures. So we're providing growth capital. However, the definition of growth capital for us is a bit different than the definition of growth capital to Partners Group. And the size of Partners Group investments, Carmela, I let you speak to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, similar to ours, we don't do venture capital, and we actually do not invest in growth companies. We are more in the sweet spot of expansion, right? So we do grow the companies, but through operational improvements or through getting them to other regions. Now, to your question on what is our standard ticket size? I would say normally we invest in companies that have an equity value between 300 million to a billion, more or less, and we try to have a majority ownership when it comes to our impact investments, so that we can really drive our impact value creation.
Okay, thank you. One more question from the audience. In response to impact at scale, how big a proportion of your asset under management are investing into the asset class direct infrastructure? And when you invest, do you mainly do private equity or also debt investment? And finally, are you always a majority equity investor into the SPVs, and what will be the steps to co-invest with you in infrastructure projects?
Okay, so yes, I mean, well, I guess I already answered the last point that we try to have a majority ownership, but we also do co-investments. To be totally honest, I'm not that familiar with the conditions for being a co-investmentor, but we can follow up on that one with our infrastructure team. And I would say more or less 15% of our AUM is in infrastructure. We also invest in private equity and in private debt. At the moment, in our impact at scale strategy, we have mostly infrastructure and private equity investments. And this is because we can really, as I mentioned before, shape the value creation of these assets. But we do see a lot of opportunities in debt, and are looking into that and trying to figure out how we can still invest in debt, consider it impact, and still have the impact conversation that we need.
And if you consider doing the debt investments, in that case, would you also consider doing private sector, public sector in a PPP transactions? Will that be a possibility then?
So for infrastructure, we don't do private debt. So we only do private debt for private equity.
Okay. Okay. And one more question, last question. Do you look actively for impact investments, or do you have a steady pipeline of projects that are presented to you?
I mean, that one, it's another big difference between us and Urs. So maybe I will cover our
Yeah.
part and then I'll leave
Yes,
it to
please.
Urs to
Yeah.
discuss his sourcing. In the case of Partners Group, we use the pipeline that Partners Group has anyway. And the reason is that since we need to be our investments need to be suitable also for our traditional or direct strategies. We use our pipeline and we select the investments that we think or could have an impact angle, and then we run them through our impact methodology to prove this impact. But we do not do dedicated sourcing. That being said, we do have impact that or themes that could be considered impact, such as, for instance, close the loop, that are interesting for private equity, right? But it's just part of our traditional sourcing efforts, nothing developed just for us.
Okay.
Urs, on your side?
Yeah, that's probably the big difference because our sole purpose is to produce impact investments, find and identify them. So the way we approach is that we, as the management, and as the founders of PG Impact Investments, we defined what problems we want to solve, and most effort goes into access to basic products and services like access to financial inclusion, affordable housing, access to energy, health, and education, but also food and agriculture and job creation. These are kind of the problems we want to solve. And then we do a lot of research around what are the best business models that we like, both from a impact perspective and from a financial value creation perspective as an investor. And then once we define these business models, then we go and build actively a pipeline to source these businesses globally.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we answered all the questions on the chat, and thank you for your time, your presentation, and the information you provided to us. You can stay if you want for the next session, or because we are going to move now to Denny's presentation on his business.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Have a
Thank you
nice
so
rest of
much.
the day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.